At its most basic level, the concept of the 80-20 ratio as it relates to male-female relationships is this. Men whose genetics place them in the top 20% of the sexual marketplace valued men have their choice of 80% of all women to sleep with. To that end, many voices in the manosphere take it a step further and double down by stating that if you're a man who's not in the top 20%, you're not able to successfully date at all. Some even go further and state that anyone who's not in the top 20% is just a beta incel. While many dating coaches have videos, articles, and talks on this subject, few go much further than beyond these most basic talking points than I just did. This is also true for those in the MGTOW community. They just regurgitate the 80-20% argument without any further explanation or analysis, as though it's self-evident. Unfortunately, when one digs deeper into the numbers and the verifiable facts behind them, one finds that the 80-20 ratio is not only not self-evident, but even worse. In multiple circumstances, verifiable reality proves it completely wrong. In order to demonstrate this, all one has to do is live life outside a self-imposed isolated environment and look at the world with an open mind. While many studies have shown that since the 1960s the marriage rate continues to drop, Statistica.com, a link will be in the description, shows that the number of married couples continues to rise. In 2020, the number of married couples in the United States was 62.34 million. In other words, in a population of about 220 million adults living in the United States, just over 124 million of them were married in 2020. This is over half of the adult population of the United States. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and just say that the 62.34 million married men weren't all in the top 20% genetically. My guess is that not even a third of these married men were in the top 20%. And if you look around the internet at married couples on social media and elsewhere, you can confirm this for yourself to be true. Now let's look at dating. According to datingnews.com, again a link will be in the description, while looks are important, interests outrank them by 15%. Now, that's not to say that looks aren't important. Nearly 50% said that looks were the most important attribute. But again, while not completely disproving the 80-20 paradigm, it does demonstrate that looks by themselves are not as necessary in the dating scene as many dating coaches and manosphere voices would have you believe. With that in mind, it's also important to reiterate that if you want to date, not that I recommend it, you need to have a life. You need hobbies and interests. While self-reliant men maintain hobbies and interests outside their professional life, they do so for themselves and not for female validation. They also have the added benefit that these are the things that women highly value in choosing whether or not to intimately engage with a man. Now, no discussion about dating in this context is complete without a discussion of dating coaches. There is no doubt that dating coaches are very successful with women, and while many of these coaches brag about sleeping with many hundreds of women, the reality is that sleeping with 100 women is beyond what most heterosexual men do in their lifetimes, even confirmed bachelors. The other interesting thing about dating coaches that is never discussed is that the majority of them are also not in the top 20% of genetically alpha men. Look at Rollo Tomasi. He's been successfully married for decades, but he looks like a recovering heroin addict. Anthony Johnson, a man who can't be much taller than 5'10". George Bruno, a geriatric man far past his prime. Zach Small, again, another small, short man. None of these PUA dating coach types and the many others out there are genetic alphas, but all are successful with women. But why? Is there some magical gift? Well, I'm glad you asked. You see, I have a whole series of coaches to teach you how to get laid to purchase for many hundreds of dollars. And if that's not enough, you can come to Las Vegas to my live convention where you can witness me pick up a hot chick live. But not just any chick, an escort I paid earlier, so she can participate in my grift to separate you from your money and your dignity. Seriously though, there is no esoteric secret that these men and men like them used to be successful with women. The reason these men are more attractive to women isn't only because they always approach women. It's because many of these dating coaches live clean, drug-free lifestyles. They meticulously groom themselves and practice good hygiene, and they devote time every day to lifting weights and working out. And finally, they're very careful about what foods they put into their bodies. And that's it. Now, there are also those who do live the bad boy lifestyle, and they're pretty successful too. But they also go to the gym, practice decent hygiene, and groom themselves. Are you seeing a pattern yet? But more to the point, the 124 million married people, dating websites, and dating coaches all prove one thing. And this is something that is not only important to underscore, but it's been true for the entire history of humanity. Men who take care of themselves, live self-reliant lifestyles, have hobbies and interests. Not only do they live more fulfilling lives, but they're far more attractive to women, and they're far more likely to get laid, despite not being in the top 20% of genetic alphas. So that begs the question, why does everyone in the manosphere act as though the 80-20 rule is set in stone and absolutely dictates whether or not a man can be intimate with a woman? Well, to answer that question, you have to look beyond the message and look more closely at the motive. Insecure men are easier to grift. It's no more complicated than that. The 80-20 rule contributes to male insecurity, and not by accident. You see, the 80-20 rule is a form of man-shaming. Whether or not those who do it are self-aware or not to know this is irrelevant. To be clear, those who push the 80-20 man-shaming are not helping men, they're hurting them by creating and playing up their insecurities. And while some of these manosphere voices are doing so unwittingly, many are just grifters who want to separate you from your hard-earned cash and shame you for the pleasure. They sell dating courses, expensive success porn Skype calls, pickup artist event tickets, and other pseudo shortcuts. And then the entire time, they're e-begging for donations like the online panhandlers they are. Now, I'm not saying that manosphere voices who help men shouldn't be compensated for what they do, but most of their paywalled content is just a regurgitation of a website that's been up for 20 years, called No Ma'am. It was a labor of love that lasted nearly 15 years and serves as the Manosphere Library of Alexandria, and should be labeled as a national treasure. So rather than letting some video content creator shame you into purchasing something you don't need, read the No Ma'am blog for yourself. And the next time you see a video by one of these content creators who are at best out of touch with reality, watch what they do, not what they say. To that end, no longer will I shame a man who's married, engaged, or dating a woman, unless they're pretending they're not doing these things. This is because where there's one, there's three. And if a guy can't be honest about his romantic life, he's lying about at least two other things as well, and is best avoided. With that said, while I won't shame these men for their romantic relationships, I will continue to warn them and others of the many negative consequences and impacts of these relationships when they fail that have destroyed the lives of tens of millions of men across the Western world. What these men choose to do with this information is up to them, but in the end, if they end up divorced, falsely accused of abuse, or falsely imprisoned, they cannot say they weren't warned. But that aside, we are all human, and sometimes we make mistakes, and misapplication of the 80-20 rule to circumstances where it is 100% wrong is a perfect example of this. If Manosphere and MGTOW voices are to maintain their credibility, then not only do they need to be honest with their subscribers, but they also need to be open-minded enough to re-examine what they've been told, rather than taking it at face value and then blindly regurgitating it like some sort of cringe mantra. Not doing so shows that this is just one more example of a red-pilled blind spot that too many content creators and their followers ignore, at the cost of their credibility. I'm DDJ, and this discussion of the misapplication of the 80-20 rule is your dose of misandry today.